Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Development Insights podcast, where we bring you ideas, experiences, and best practices from the real estate development industry. My name is Hayam Noor Salehi. I'm the president of Dena Project Management, a construction and project management firm that helps real estate developers define, design, and deliver successful projects. My guest for this episode is Ben Myers. Ben is the president and owner of Bullpen Research and Consulting, Inc., and he has over 20 years of experience in real estate research, both in the United States and Canada. Ben has basically been around for a while, and he has been through multiple cycles of the market. He especially and specifically established himself in the research and analysis part of the industry, and he's a go-to source for the latest information and insights on domestic and residential housing market. Ben is also the host of a very well-known podcast in the city of Toronto, which is Toronto Under Construction, TUC, which I also suggest you guys visit. In this episode, we talk about his background, where he came from, and also dive deep into the current economy. We talk about condos and rental markets, where they are, where we have been, where we're probably going to go to, and we try and come up with some mild predictions, if you may, for the foreseeable future, and some ideas and insights to think about and plan for your portfolio for the next few years. As always, you can find all the relevant information about this podcast, our guests, and what they do on our website, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. That's all one phrase. And please remember to subscribe to our show, and even better, please tell others about it and help us grow the show. Thank you and enjoy listening. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. It's, I guess, our first time having a celebrity on the show, industry celebrity. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to our audience in a second. But before you do that, I have to say on record that what you started doing a while ago was one of the reasons, one of the inspirations that we're having this conversation today. And it got me started about a year and a half ago. So thank you for paving the way. But with that introduction, I'll ask you to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So my name is Ben Myers. I am the president of a company called Bullpen Research and Consulting. What we do is work with developers, lenders, landowners on mostly residential market studies. So my business used to be primarily condo market studies, and now it is primarily rental market studies. Yeah, the market has obviously shifted, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I do land valuations every once in a while, like an opinion of value is a little bit different than an official appraiser's report. But given the lack of high density land transactions lately, I'm doing fewer of those as well. But I also podcast myself. So I have a show called the Toronto Under Construction podcast. We're about 90 episodes in. We do a little bit differently than some other podcasters. We typically do table discussion where I pick out a specific topic or genre and bring in some experts in that range. And yeah, so if I was inspired by you, I was inspired by the commercial real estate podcast, and they have on in the commercial real estate space, and I wanted to have more guests to talk about the residential market and get into a little bit deeper into that. And it's been fun. I really enjoy it, and I love talking to my clients and other interesting guests out there and meeting people for the first time on the show, which is always a little bit interesting. But yeah, it's fun. Probably would have a little bit more fun if the market wasn't.
If the market was a little bit better.
It was a little bit better, but certainly over the time that I've podcasted, we've had a very strong market in 2019. We had COVID for a couple of years, and we did the show remotely, and then bubble-like conditions in early 2022, and really soft conditions since. But there's obviously some enthusiasm about the future of the market, at least for the rental side of things, given
and we're going to dive into that because we definitely need some good news coming our way. Like we just heard that, and we're going to talk about interest rates in this podcast as well. But I want to double click on Ben for a second.
Sure.
Because like you said, these days you're mostly known, at least in many of the circles that I'm in, for your podcast and the work that you've been doing, great work you've been doing. But I want to dive in a little bit deeper. So you have your research and analysis company, walk us through, first of all, I want to get into, before we get into exactly what it is that you guys do on a daily basis, how did you get into it? Like, it sounds like it's not the first niche that someone would think of, at least.
I mean, I always loved math, and I always loved numbers. My mother loves to tell people that when I was 5 years old, I'd ask her to write down numbers on a piece of paper so I could add them up. And I've always just loved doing math and figuring things out. And I really left my major to the last moment. And I just decided, hey, what class do I enjoy the most out of all the classes that I'm taking? And it was economics. So I decided to take economics as my major, and was living in Dallas, Fort Worth at the time. I got a baseball scholarship, so I ended up playing baseball there. And after you graduate from a U.S. university, you can get a 1-year student extension visa. So I ended up getting a job down there, and really just by random, it was in the real estate space. So it was driving around Dallas, Fort Worth, and going to sales offices and entering those prices into spreadsheets and databases, and doing very little analysis on that information, more of just data collection. But you have enough conversations, you start to figure things out, and continued doing that in Ontario when I moved back after that year. I worked for a company called Clayton Research, and then moved on to a company that did condo market statistical analysis and tracking. And yeah, so my career took off at that firm and became a little bit more well known and interesting track in the real estate space. And certainly it wasn't something I had planned, but as time goes on, you start to become passionate about it. And I love talking real estate, talking architecture and space. But in the end, for me, it's always how do I take all that information and bring it back to the value, right? And what is the value of a balcony? What is the value of each additional square footage, a bedroom, a bathroom, a den, outdoor space? Really, these are the conversations that I have to try to enlighten me and come up with some of these solutions so we can, my developer clients, my lender clients can make smart decisions, right?
Yeah, so let's double click on that, because I know dealing with multiple developers throughout the years, there is, I guess, one school of thought which is probably not wrong as well, which is basically, if you cannot figure it out on the back of a napkin on a high level basis, you should be doing it. And there's another level of school of thought that is closer probably to the other end of the spectrum, that we are squeezing every single inch out of every single space and running the numbers. And my guess is that probably the right answer is somewhere in between. But with that being said, maybe walk us through that, because at the end of the day, you know as well as I do, in the past 10 years, in the current, and especially in the current climate that we have, it's been really hard to predict or forecast the patterns of especially the approval cycles, and top that with the economic cycle. It has been very hard to do that. And with that opening, I would like to ask you to walk us through the crux of the work, like what does Ben do to come up with, and I'm not asking you to share any industry secrets or anything, but just so for people to understand, because I still deal with a lot of developers or investors who run their own performance on a spreadsheet, a single sheet, and make big decisions based on that. Maybe walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, I think most of the sites that I'm working have passed a little bit of the sniff test. They're not, delivering negative returns. So they have something that might work, and they're looking to me to help them refine that. There's obviously different types of developers out there. Some of them are a merchant developer, and they may be only concentrating on getting the highest upfront rent per square foot so they can sell the building. Where I have some clients that are legacy clients that they're building a rental building on existing land of apartment buildings that they already own, and they're looking to own this building for the life cycle of their company, and it may go on hundreds of years. So they're looking for something that is recession proof and that has different unit mix and different unit sizes so that they're covered when market conditions change. So we're always keeping that in the back of our mind when looking at projects and who the potential renters will be and potential buyers, obviously, on the condo side of things, and really just trying to crunch the numbers in as absolute many ways as possible. Once you get into sample sizes of specific projects and specific areas, those numbers can be skewed in many different ways. So we always have to look at them and break them down in as many ways as possible to make sure that we're not getting fooled by one project or a couple of units here and there, and make sure we're making smart long-term decisions, because most of the work that I'm doing is in the pre-construction phase. So they haven't even started construction on this building when they're making these decisions, and we're trying to put today's values on them, when obviously that, the market could change significantly in 3 to 4 years. But we're trying to I'm trying to help them make the smartest decisions based off of today's market and where we think the market is moving forward.
We'll be right back.
Just a quick announcement. If you're thinking about financing your next project, your next rental project through CMHC, and in particular about the MLS Select program, please go to our website and check out our new webinar series. It's a free webinar series where we're talking about different aspects of the program, how you can qualify, how you can get more points. And we basically break down exactly what you need to know to access better terms, higher leverage, and longer amortization. Again, it's free, and you can find more information about it at mid-rise.ca/webinars, midrise.ca/webinars. Thank you. And I would say a bulk of our audience would be the people who are trying out new projects. They're trying to scale up their development game. Maybe they've done smaller scale and now they want to get in, or they haven't done any development in the past and they're trying to get into development markets as an investor or a developer. When would be a good time for people like in that situation to approach someone like yourself and get the best return on investment?
Yeah, I think a lot of clients come to me before they're putting in their development application. So I'm making recommendations on the unit mix, unit sizing, the amenities within the building. So you want to have an idea of how much square footage you have and want to use for amenities and the mix of units. But a lot of times my clients come to me, they've already submitted an application. They know what their net leasable GFA is going to be, but they want to better break it down and understand what that mix of units is. Is the revenue where it needs to be? And the other thing where I'm getting a lot of work, obviously, is CMHC requires a market study with their package in order to qualify for the various incentive programs that they have running right now. And so that's making up a good portion of my business right now. Is some developers are required to get these studies they'll ask me for. But I hope that it's more than just what they need for their application. That's helping them better and make better informed decisions. You had Marlon Bray on your podcast a couple shows ago, and I had him on my podcast, and his thing was just use Google if you want to figure out what the rents are. But that's probably the absolute worst thing you could ever do, because asking rents and actual rents can often be quite different and quite skewed in what you might see online versus what something's actually renting for. So I would always recommend going a little bit deeper than a basic Google search or now ChatGPT search.
ChatGPT, it's interesting you brought it up. I had a whole personal episode with ChatGPT a few days ago because I went through this exercise with it. And I asked ChatGPT, basically, I asked it, was it worth this whole thing about sixplexes that recently happened in the city of Toronto, getting DC's waived? Is it going to help? And it was an interesting conversation we're having. And sometimes I have to remind myself that it's actually AI, so don't start beating it up. But you're right, you have to vet what you're getting. I want to zoom out a little bit. We zoomed in, we're looking at square footage, rents and stuff. You, with the background in economy, you're the numbers guy. You don't have my assumption, and which I believe to be true, is that your insights come from data. If I were to zoom out and I wanted to look at it and say, we're sitting here in 2025, but we've seen some stuff like this, maybe a little bit in 2017, maybe definitely in 2008. If you want to go way further back, probably at the beginning of the millennia, like 2001 or something. Like we've had bumps in the road as an economy, like as a global economy. Where are we right now in your mind? Are we in comparable situations to any of those? Or is it better? Is it worse? Is that a fair question to even ask?
We'll be right back.
Just a quick announcement and we go back to the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Denel Project Management. That's right, that's my own company. At Denel, we help developers navigate the complexity of mid-rise and multi-unit projects from very early stages of feasibility and approvals through design, construction and occupancy process. Our focus has been and always will be on proper planning. I'm a big believer in proper planning, risk management, and value engineering your project so your project can be delivered on time, on budget, and within your defined parameters. If you're working on a mid-rise project or an infill project, feel free to reach out to us and see how our team can help you. You can visit our website, denaprojects.com. We would love the opportunity to work with you and your team on your future projects. Now back to the show.
That's a hard one to answer. I started my career in 2001, all right? For the bulk of my career, the housing market in the Greater Toronto area was ripping, right? You know, was going strong. Values were going up. Obviously, the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009 was in the context of the Greater Toronto area real estate market was some minor blip, right? We weren't impacted anywhere near what happened and anywhere in the United States. And then 2013 was a little bit slow, 2014 in terms of the new condo market. And then again in 2017, when they had the Fair Housing Plan come in, they banned foreign buyers or put a foreign buyer tax, rent control. So there were some issues there. And then obviously the first 3 or 4 months of COVID, but to think that it was only 3 or 4 months of a blip during COVID is pretty shocking. That by the summer of 2020, the developers were back launching condo projects again. It really is, in terms of the condo market, the worst that I've experienced in my career. We're talking about mid-1990s numbers that are happening right now. I think it's not going to recover for several years, unfortunately, for any of my clients that are listening. But you have to look at the future, and I think that the GTA needs to add somewhere between 25 and 35,000 new housing units per year to satisfy underlying demand. We are doing that right now. We're actually probably exceeding that. I think the plan for 2025 is we might even have 35,000 condo completions, and then from 4,000 to 7,000 rental completions. So we could have over 40,000 apartment completions in 1 year, and that's why you're you're continuing to see price deflation in the ownership market, and rents are starting to go down. What's interesting was when you break the rents down is the ones 500 and 600 square foot units, they're the ones that are seeing the biggest decline. 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms are not seeing as much decline. Just the massive amount of investor held small condo units are pushing down the rent, but some of the larger stuff, the little bit more livable stuff that we see in the marketplace is not experiencing as big of a decline. Big picture, it's going even past the Greater Toronto area and looking at Canada, like who can really predict what's going on? We have an administration south of the border that is just doing something weird and different every single day, and tariffs on, tariffs off. So
it makes us on our toes.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to understand. We're obviously making changes to immigration into this country, and that's obviously a big driver of real estate in our marketplace. But beyond that, you would think of, we've really undersupplied the market. I'm telling you, I thought we needed as many as 35,000 new housing units. So we hadn't been delivering that until 2024. And so we can see prices go up and up. And what happened there, you have people taking on roommates. We have people in their late 30s still living with their mom and dad. We have people that would have moved to the GTA from other areas of Ontario, United States, other provinces, choosing not to because it's so expensive and working from home. And so there's this latent demand, which is really difficult to calculate what it really is. Will people, if prices start to go on, will less people leave? You know, the grid for the Woodstocks and the Aurelias and the markets like that. Will we have more people move from Ottawa, from London, from Kitchener-Waterloo, move to the GTO? Rents have gone down. Okay, now that it's $2,700 a month and not $3,200, instead of working from home in Cambridge, maybe I'm going to move to downtown Toronto. So it's always difficult to understand where those keys are to get someone to change their decision on where they want to live. So that's what makes it really difficult to forecast the Toronto market. It's not like some of the smaller markets where they're not getting the same in and out migration. They're not getting the same explosive job growth as we are in the city of Toronto, and they're not a global destination that people want to live to and move to. Very difficult to forecast.
Yeah, that's a very complicated situation to be definitely walking through, and even for anyone who's in the office. And sometimes I feel bad for people who are in the office right now because this is a super complicated situation. with that being said, and we're recording this today not to too much date the episode, but we got the news that Bank of Canada is going to hold its rates still for another period. And one of the recent conversations that I've been hearing and I've been reading online is, okay, good. Now we balanced the market a little bit. We slowed things down. How far is enough? At what point in time? And I'm not just talking about Bank of Canada's interest rate. I'm generally speaking, how much longer as an industry can we take it before there's not much left to be revived? At some point, people are not just going to stick around, and they're probably go and find other careers, or to your point, they're going to move around. And I'm talking less on the renter side and the purchaser side. I'm more talking about the people who are working in the industry, because believe it or not, like at the end of the day, a vast majority of people who live in this area have somehow a relationship with their occupations that are related with the construction and real estate development industry. Mike Moffat had a piece a few days ago that basically the starts have gone down significantly. The forecast for 2027, 2028, 2029 is basically scary in terms of the completion numbers, which all of that brings up the question, how long is too long in this current state, and how long before it's too late to do something? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It's hard when I think in a GTA context. That's basically the only way that I think, and the federal government is making decisions on the entire country. It's always a little difficult to look at both. I mean, obviously the Bank of Canada is trying to control inflation. Inflation seems to be under control. And I mean, I didn't read any of their press release or any of the documentation that they put out there, but just in terms of the GTA, the construction industry is going fine right now, given the number of projects that are under construction. But in the future, it's just going to be a bloodbath, essentially, in this industry. Like, we went from selling 30 to 35,000 condo units to less than 5,000. We're getting some rental starts. We're trending in that 4,000 to 7,000 range, but nothing like the 25 to 30,000 condo projects. I was looking at some of the data in terms of projects that are under construction right now. In 2028, we could get 2,300 condo completions in 2020. If you add on
to 35 that we have this.
Yeah, and if you add on, say 5,000 rental, we're at 7,500. When I said at the very least, we probably need 25,000 units. In the future, once we start to eat through some of this supply, and this is probably going to start happening in the second half of 2027. We're really going to start to see rents and prices take off. I've been telling my clients that by 2028, we could be seeing 7.5% to 10% growth. By 2029, we could be seeing double-digit rent growth, maybe even 15%. And so I know it's difficult for most people if they're underwriting a rental deal when we're seeing rents decline at 2 to 3% a year to say, hey, let's move forward, because in 2029, it's going to go up double digits, but that's really where we're heading. We saw a little bit of this, and I mentioned in 2013, where we had a pretty soft pre-construction condo market. I think we sold somewhere around 12,500 units in that year. And that was really like the low water mark from all the way from, we say which year, say 2005 to 2021. That was like the lowest year. And so then you fast forward 4 years, we had a lack of completions in 2017. And then we saw prices go up, and we saw rents go up in 5, 7, 8, 9%, some areas, double digits, some areas. And then articles started coming out in the Toronto Star about people raising rents by 20%. And that was really what fueled the federal government to put on rent control based off of articles in the newspaper. So really quite shocking that the small amount of information that they're taking in to make massive policy decisions. So we've seen a precedence of that, but we're just going to see it on a much more massive scale. We're going to see way fewer completions that we saw than in 2017. And yes, it's going to more people are going to go back to living with mom and dad. People are going to move away from the city of Toronto and move out of the Greater Toronto area. More families will head to Welland and Niagara region and Barrie and the likes. But I still think some people are tied to their jobs. They want to be close to family. They have their doctors. They have their friends. A lot of people are just not going to get up and move to London, Ontario. They want to live here, and they're going to have to start paying 50% of their income in rent and start making sacrifices elsewhere. So
unless, and that's definitely the part of me that does wishful thinking, is that unless some major drastic measure happens in the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months, which I don't want to say I've given up on it. And you see a lot of these condo projects that I'm sure you know of and I've been involved in. A lot of them have been thinking, some of them have already done the pivot, if you may. That goal, we had a condo, let's change it, let's tweak it a little bit, now do a rental. CMHC seems to be supporting. The requirements are not getting any easier. But at the end of the day, that's the only thing is working. One of them, I'm happy you said about what you just said, that the rents are forecasted to go up, because when we're having these conversations, a lot of people are saying, you know what, the rents haven't even hit the bottom, rock bottom yet. So it doesn't really justify for us to start. And I'm happy to hear that you think that even if you are a little bit soft on your performance today, you could be in a position for the long term that obviously the rental is a long-term game. It's not by definition, it's not like a condo that you get a short-term return. So I think from one perspective, that's a good sign. From one perspective, that if you are into the rental market and if you want to start rental projects, this is probably not a bad time to do that. If you can wait it out until the market turns back. Did I get that right?
We'll be right back.
Just a quick announcement. If you're thinking about financing your next project, your next rental project through CMHC, and in particular about the MLS Select program, please go to our website and check out our new webinar series. It's a free webinar series where we're talking about different aspects of the program, how you can qualify, how you can get more points. And we basically break down exactly what you need to know to access better terms, higher leverage, and longer amortization. Again, it's free, and you can find more information about it at mid-rise.ca/webinars, midrise.ca/webinars. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the difficulty, if these developers are trying to get CMHC financing, CMHC wants to look at today's rent levels. They're not as bullish on the forecast of Ben Myers and Bullpen Research Consulting. So they want those numbers to work today. And as you said, rents are trending down today. It's difficult for them to make these decisions based off of where the market is going in the future. And obviously, I could be wrong. I've been wrong in the past, but trends suggest the simple supply and demand that we've seen in the past. We undersupply, prices go up. We oversupply, prices and rents go down. It's pretty simple. We've seen it over and over in our market and in every market that operates in a global capacity. And again, you mentioned a little bit earlier, is again, my worry is once a lot of these condo projects start to complete and some of these trades don't have the work, they start laying people off. The people that have worked on these projects start getting maybe a blue collar job here. Maybe they start doing something else, and maybe they find that working in an office pushing paper is a little less hard than being out in 40-degree summers,
Very true.
Nailing things together and working on the 40th floor of a condo tower. And met several of these construction workers that they live in Oshawa, they live in Clarington, Ontario, and they get up at 3:30 a.m., leave at 4 to get, and they're working on a downtown Toronto condo project and paying $60 a day for parking. Can be a pretty fun day for some of these people, and they may find that the stress and the passion's not there when the market's not as hot. And that's my
brutal
worry.
Side of the industry as well, that even in 2022, when we were having the boom, basically, we couldn't find enough people. That was a serious issue. We couldn't get enough on any level, pretty much, from project managers all the way down to superintendents, to site people, to laborers. Like, trades were having issues. And obviously, you probably noticed, you definitely noticed that the mass exodus that is happening in the labor industry, in the construction industry, regardless of whatever's going on right now, it was happening and it will keep happening. So I'm just thinking to myself, 3 years from now, if we're going to have a boom, hopefully we will, but then who's going to build all those stuff? Then we probably have to figure out another way to staff the jobs.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that you've been wrong before, and I definitely think I've been wrong before multiple times. Are you seeing any side trends or a little bit of signals here and there, or have you been seeing that you say, you know what, maybe something is happening in this area or this typology of the project or that corner of the city, something that is a little bit in the different direction of the majority of the industry? Are you seeing something like that?
Yeah, I think one thing that hasn't happened that I thought was going to happen, I thought that we'd see many more condo projects dropping their prices significantly, right? They start lowering their prices 20, 25%. I think for a lot of developers, that's their profit. If they were to lower their prices to that level, they would make nothing. So they are deciding to rent units out and take inventory loans to prevent some of those values and keeping their fingers crossed in hopes that the market comes back swiftly, which obviously I'm not predicting that it will. And the other one is there's been a lack of cancellations, which I thought you can't stay in pre-construction for 3 years holding on to the deposits of these purchasers, just saying, hey, just chill a little bit. Rates are going to go down. The market's going to come back. I mean, that's unfair. And so I would like to see more of these projects canceled because we want these purchasers to decide to go somewhere else or maybe they deploy their money in the resale market and start to prop that up. And because the resale market always leads the new home market. So if we start to see the resale market improving, then we'll start to see more buyers in the new home market. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure,
But you're right. There's a huge amount of capital stuck up in these projects that are 30% sold or 40% sold. They can't get past the threshold of getting financing to start construction, but at the same time, when you add up the numbers, it's quite a bit. And the chance of redeploying that capital, there's some blood there that could be injected to the system. And it's probably not as much as we need, but it's not a bad thing. What are your thoughts on these smaller scale projects? Do you have any clients that are working? I've been having multiple conversations with people who are working on the missing middle, per se, section of the market, and are working on the 4plexes, 6plexes, 10 unit buildings. So they have certain exemptions, certain advantages or bonuses applied to those projects. Are you seeing any movement? Are you involved in any of those?
Yeah, most of the projects that I work on are at least 100,000 square feet of GFA, 100 units at the very minimum. So I don't look a lot at these types of projects. I like them. I love missing middle. The first condo that I ever bought was in a 16-unit building, and it just fit right in between. It fit an affordable housing project and a dojo, just got a little skinny project. And I think these are great, but the developer that built it was the second developer working on the project because the first one went bankrupt. And I was speaking to the realtor, and said, hey, how'd this developer do? And he's like, I didn't make any money. All right. And I've talked to plenty of developers that have done small scale projects, and all they want to do is do big ones the next one. Because there's so many small issues that can happen that can eat up all of your profit, right? There's not a lot of wiggle room, and more power to everyone that's done it. If you go to my Patreon page at tuck.com/Patreon, I went into a small missing middle project over where I live on Girard and near Main Street. Very cool little project. I got the tour from the developer. I'd love to see more of these small projects with some laneway homes out the back. And I think that's a great way to add supply to our marketplace and more quote unquote family sized units. Is it going to make any dent into the, again, quote unquote housing crisis? No, we're making sixplexes. You'd need 100 sixplexes to make up for one Lanterra condo project, right? And yes, the units are larger. We'll take that into consideration, but in the end, you need a lot of these projects to deliver the type of housing.
Significant amount of that, You need thousands of people.
And we ignore the fact that it's a sixplex, but you're typically taking down 1 or 2 units, so the net gain is actually only 4 or 5 units, and quote unquote again. We're losing a family size unit, and a large family size unit in most of these instances where they're tearing down a home that's anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 square feet.
That's also a fair point. That's also
it's not a perfect solution to our housing crisis. But again, I love them. I think they're great. I love neighborhoods. I love walking through neighborhoods. So it's a little bit, as a guy that's in the high density business, and it's all about tearing these things down and building high rise. I'm a little torn sometimes when I walk through some of these cute little neighborhoods with the tree overhangs and go, oh, this is fantastic. Wouldn't it be great if we could build 3 and 4 story sixplexes and stuff in here that gives a little bit more access to people that don't want to be in the towers. I hope that it takes off, and I hope that we get more.
I think there's a little bit of room for that for sure. Like, to your point, 100% agreed. It's not going to solve our problem. unless we have tens of thousands of people doing these things all across Canada, probably it's not going to be significant enough to put a real dent. That being said, at this point in time, I think we should take anything we can. Like even adding 5 units these days on a single street, like at the end of these 5 units, like you're solving something. I want to switch gears a little bit, Ben.
Sure.
I want you to put on your podcast host hat for a second. You've interviewed quite a number of people. I don't know if you know the number on top of your head, but I'm going to guess it's more than 100, possibly in the hundreds. And what are some of the common themes that you've seen? Either people you've interviewed someone and you were like, you know what, now I get why this guy is so successful. Or on the other side, you've interviewed the people or a project, you've talked about a project, and you're like, oh, now it makes sense why that project didn't work. What are some of the bigger lessons, things that you've learned through all these interviews?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think I've met a lot of really smart people. And those smart people, at least in the development space, really make the effort to understand every single corner of the business. They try to be an expert in everything they can and try to have the conversations with someone like you on the construction side, someone like me on the market side, have the conversations with planning people. And it's thinking outside the box, trying to see where the market is going. And it's not easy always to see where it's going because the market is always evolving. And it's difficult. There's a lot of people that got involved in this industry because pricing was going up and it looked easy. And in a lot of those projects, You're now seeing my friend Jeremiah list them for sale in the sale process. So yeah, I don't know if there's any common theme. I wish I had an insightful comment there, but
what you just said actually makes sense to me, because I can attest to that a lot of people that I've seen who work in development and who repeatedly work, and they're not a one-off, they have over the years dedicated themselves to learning what every single piece does, at least to some extent. Like I have a client right now, which I very much respect and I like working with, and he has a saying, he says, I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know too much. And that's literally, I take that pretty much is the same thing you're saying probably, that you need to know just enough to make sure you're making the most efficient and effective decision.
Yeah. One of the developer companies that I have a lot of respect for is Center Court. I've had a couple of their employees on my podcast, and I'm a big fan of two of their founders. And one thing that they did, which was a little bit different than other development companies, is they just tried to hire the smartest people that they could. People that are passionate, hardworking, and were very smart, that we could teach them real estate. We don't always just want to bring in the same recycled folks that have worked for 5 different development companies that always do everything the same way, and they're scared of trying to do things differently. We need some smart new ideas, and that people that maybe ask questions that you wouldn't have thought would be answered or thought would be asked because they're in the industry and that's the way you always do it. But sometimes you need to ask those questions. Why do we do it this way? What if we did it like this? And I think that's why they've been so successful in their market and gone from developer doing one project model to essentially top 3 developer every single year.
Right. And that's a good way of working. I was lucky enough to accidentally do that early on, because when I came to Canada, many of the way things are done in construction industry in Canada was different from what I used to do and the way I was taught in school. So I coincidentally ended up asking a whole bunch of those stupid questions, and which opened a whole bunch of doors. And to be honest with you, I'm like, why are we doing this like this? And we ended up doing some changes to the projects and made some money for our clients, and that was a good start. So I 100% agree with that. Can we role play for a second?
Sure.
I can give you 5 minutes or less with Doug Ford or Mark Carney. First of all, which one would you like?
I'd probably take Doug Ford because I think he can make the biggest difference on the housing market in the Greater Toronto area in terms of forcing the municipalities to do certain things. So that would be probably the person that I would want to chat with.
And what would you pitch to him?
I think I would pitch making changes to development charges, right, across the board. I think that's something that we need to do. I think we should make investments in the construction side of the business, either through provincial factories to do modular, panelized, industrial type housing, that can, I think, and again, going back to Marlon that was on the show, he talked about how some of these factors have popped up, but then the real estate market shifts and they have no homes to build and they need building homes. So if we have the government propping up some of these facilities and they can just keep pumping out properties and we can put some of them on government land as opposed to private sites and we can keep them going. But it's been talked about ad nauseum on my podcast and your podcast and others that the taxes and fees on new homes are 30% to 33%.
Yeah.
The cost of the taxes on a unit, a condo unit in Scarborough, is more than a brand new unit where I used to live in Dallas, Texas. When people say to me, "Oh, why is it so cheap in Dallas? It must be the developers charging a lot." I'm like, no, it's government fees and it's land availability. There's nothing we really do about land availability unless you want to get rid of the green belt, which most people don't want to do. You need to make the investment in infrastructure. That was the one thing about living in Dallas-Fort Worth was they made massive investments in infrastructure. They're always building ring roads and they're putting in transit when no one even wants to take transit. They're building transit. It's pretty unbelievable when we take how many years to get this Eglinton Crosstown built and it's still not running. It's embarrassing, right? I'm not sure if you spent too much time on social media, but I don't know how many times I've seen that chart where it shows what Toronto's subway looks like and then one of the cities from China that what their subway looks like 20 years ago and today, and they got 40 lines, and we added half a line.
That's a very sad image. I know which one you're talking about. It's very sad.
We've got our subway on Shepherd that goes nowhere.
So we'll ask Mr. Doug Ford if he or any of his team members are listening, please try and invest in infrastructure.
We need a streetcar subway along Lakeshore, and we can unlock all that. I went down to the new park in the Portlands this weekend. Absolutely fantastic. Kudos to anyone that's working for Waterfront Toronto. Just unbelievable. And I hope that this kind of downturn in the real estate market doesn't impact the pace there. I had Derek Goring on my show, what he's doing at Downsview and ZYD. And there's some really cool large-scale projects that I think could come on and just make an absolute world-class development. So I hope that our real estate market bounces back and that our governments realize that how many people work in this industry. It's not just building housing, but it's creating massive amounts of jobs. Some people buy a new house and then they go out and they buy window coverings and they buy new carpets and they buy microwaves and utensils. It's such this process that keeps going when people make these types of investments. So when it's going the other way, it's really sad. One of my previous companies worked with very closely was LA Ads, a marketing firm in the GTA new condo space. They just shut their business down. And normally, which a former guest of mine had to get rid of a bunch of his staff, and there's no one better. There's no one nicer. There's no one better out there in the industry than normally. And the fact that he had to lay off some of his staff is sad. And I know there's probably one housing bear out there that's happy to see this, right? It's condo developers making tiny units and making massive profits, but small units are fine just because you don't like them. Some people are quite happy to live in a small unit, and they're quite.
That's really true. At the end of the day, having a roof is better than not having one, even if it's a small one.
I don't understand why people want to take their personal preferences and force them on others. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. It makes me so frustrated that just people keep saying the same stuff over and over again. And it's from the left and the right. The left-leaning folks, it's, we need more affordable housing. We don't need these market units. And I say to myself, why can't we have both? There's no reason why we can't have both affordable housing and market rate housing. It's my frustration in the whole thing.
I do agree. And I want to go back to something you just mentioned on the modular and the prefabricated. I've been involved and I am involved in a project that we've been dealing with prefabricated material and systems. And exactly what you said, it's really hard to get them going. They're great when they work, but unless there's a continuous demand for their supply, it's really not like you can turn on the light and turn off the light tomorrow morning. And it's a very hard business to keep alive. So I truly agree that the government needs to step in if they want to see it proceed, which I think they should. They need to put some weight behind it and make it happen. Okay, I want to try and not wrap up the podcast, this interview, with all doom and gloom. Is there anything that you're seeing out there that gives you a glimpse of hope and you see, you know what, maybe we pulled this thread and light comes at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of smart folks out there and they want to build housing and they see that the GTA is an extremely desirable place to live. They're making investments based off of a 10, 15, and 20-year timelines. So what's happening in the current market is obviously disappointing for them, but they see that construction costs are starting to come down, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit.
And that, despite the rate pause, that they anticipate rates will be lower moving forward. And they see that the government is making changes, obviously, to GST, to HST, to development charges, to deferrals on certain other fees. CMHC is changing its various programs to make them more viable in certain areas. I think that we're going to see more rentals next year get under construction. I still think the condo market is a few years away. I hope that it comes back, maybe not to the same, I don't think it'll come back to quite the same amount, but it may come back in a form that gets a little bit more political support. So maybe the story towers with 900 units averaging 510 square feet. Maybe we go back to what we saw in the early 2000s, more projects that are 20 to 25 stories, maybe 175,000 square feet of GFA, 200 units or something, a little bit more moderate projects, maybe a little bit larger units in those projects. And maybe we get a little bit from under the overly investor market. Maybe it's still 60% investors, 40% end users, and we get away from some of the over-reliance on studios. I think we might have overbuilt studios a bit in the marketplace.
And expensive ones.
Yeah, but in the end, in a couple of years from now, people would be begging for anything that's less than $5 square foot. Right. The good thing about investors is they've made this commitment, and once that building gets under construction, you can't take those units away, right? Those units are built, and they're going to be homes for people in the future, which I think that we forget. And even, I use the term units all the time, but they're homes. They're homes for people. And just because you live in a 2,500 square foot single family home with a giant backyard, if I was to move behind that and I find out that your daddy gave you $175,000 and you work as the vice president in your grandfather's company, I'm like, okay, come on. Let's not. These people who that are living in 375 square feet, no one's putting a gun to their head, right? Yeah. They love the city of Toronto, or maybe they love North York. They want to be there. That's where their friends are. And they're willing to sacrifice some square feet because they like where they live. The building's great amenities. It's got a party room and a gym, and
there's nothing wrong with that.
And a rooftop terrace and a pool. And I just sleep here, and I live in the neighborhood. So I don't want to go and move into a 1964 rental building and I might be able to get a unit that's twice the size. I'm making the decision to make that. I'm respectful of anyone's decision where they want to live and how they want to choose their money. It's not my place to put it. Would I prefer developers build larger units? Sure. Why? But the market's the market. At the end of the day,
you have to be able to pay for it.
They have to sell these units in pre-construction. And unless the lending environment changes, then they're going to continue to be required to sell units in advance. And the funny thing is, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, is when I look at the unit sizes from a purpose-built rental apartment versus a condo project, they're only about 5 to 7% larger for the purpose-built rental developers. Right?
True.
Their percentage of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms versus what a condo project is doing is, it might be 60% ones and 1+ dens for a condo, but then maybe it might be 50% for a purpose-built rental. It's such a small difference between what is getting programmed at these two buildings. There's too many people who think the purpose-built rental is the panacea of everything housing, and we should have that. All we needed was rent control on top of that, even though these buildings are coming out at $4.75 a square foot. If you can afford $4,000 a month, do you really need rent control on top of that to save these poor people who are paying $4,000 a month? It really is a weird world. We just need to deliver as much housing as possible. And I think that we're not quite taking this downturn seriously enough, because people still go out and they see the cranes and they see the activity. But in a few years, when we start seeing any of that, right? We stop seeing any of that new housing. We start to see more negative numbers about job loss in the construction industry, I think they're going to have to take it a little bit more seriously. And I hope that they do. I hope that we realize that housing is the number one thing that we need to start with, right? Housing and food.
True.
Is people need a roof over their head and they need something to eat. And we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to service those two things. I guess health. We want to keep that. But that's a whole nother podcast, right?
I'm sure you and I can talk quite a bit about it. In your 90-something episode, which I think you've done so far on your own podcast, what's your favorite question?
Wow. I like to ask people what their challenges are. Just really open-ending. What's something that's challenging you right now? Just what's keeping you up at night? Those are the ones that they ask frequently. Usually they're specific to an article or something that I find in a newspaper. But when I give them kind of an open ending, it's always interesting to see what they come up with and what little small thing that they're working on. So that's my favorite.
Can I turn that question to you right now? Is it something that we haven't talked about yet? What is keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I mean, when you're a small business owner like myself, I lose sleep over either having too much business and then worrying that I can't deliver the reports on time, and then worrying about that I don't have enough business, then I won't have any income, and that my kids are going to starve. So there's always my two things that I'm worrying about. But I guess my long-term worry is that I'm doing a lot of rental studies now. But a lot of those rental studies are based off of condo developers that have purchased sites, and now they're trying to decide what to do with them, right? In the future, if they don't move forward with a rental and no one else is buying sites, then maybe there's no consistent business for myself moving forward if the condo market doesn't return over the next couple of years. So that's certainly something that I worry about, and I worry about the future of the residential housing market, that it's fundamentally changed because it's hard for an end user to make a decision to buy a condo project that's going to take 3 to 4 years to be delivered. Your life changes a lot in 4 years. I mean, I was 40 pounds less.
You and I both.
I would need a larger unit if I had bought in the pre-construction market today. So it's hard for people to make that type of decision, and you have to put, 15, 20% down. You're buying off a piece of paper. That project could get canceled. Lots of things can happen. You could lose your job, and then you're forced to make that close in the future that you might not have the ability to. So as much as people just absolutely lose their mind over investors, they're really it's crowdfunding equity. They're just a middleman. They're a footlocker. They're taking the product from one person, delivering it to another person in the future.
And you would not have been able to do many of these projects, or any of these projects for that matter, if it wasn't for investors. At the end of the day, that's the capitalist market. That's the way it works. It's the stock market. It's all investors. That's why I also sometimes I'm questioning, why are we blaming investors? At the end of the day, if someone is putting their hard-earned money to back a venture, which is presumably a good venture, like you said, we have to give everyone housing and food. Why are they at fault? Yeah. That's the part that didn't make
ultimately,
sense.
The investors most of them are selling into the end user market eventually. So it's just a delayed process. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Not right at occupancy. Not all the units are going to end users, but over time they slowly sell off. It's just a delayed process of delivering the units to the end users. And because if it wasn't for investors, we would be back to where we were in the year 2000 when I was starting in this industry, and what I just talked about, 25-story towers that are 200 units instead of 50, 60, 70-story buildings delivering 500 unit plus. So many of these people would not have the homes that they have now. They wouldn't have the lives that they have now if it wasn't for an investor buying that unit and providing the upfront revenue certainty to lenders and developers to get those projects built. In the end, I think given the choice, would some of these people that are renting units in those buildings prefer to be in a purpose-built rental with rent control and a professional manager? Yeah. But a lot of them are young people. They're going to be moving in 1 or 2 years anyways.
Life happens. Yeah.
They don't want to pay for security of tenure. Yeah. When I compare the rent for a purpose-built rental versus a condo for rent in a to-like building, you got to pay 10% more for the purpose-built rental. So you're paying for that security of tenure, and you can make that choice. Any of those people can make that choice to go into purpose-built rental versus
at the end of the day, it's about having the choice, right? It's about having the choice. If you can't afford it, if you have the choice, the problem happens when you run out of choices, and you're forced to make a decision based on market forces which are beyond your control.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up by asking you, and hoping you can point our audience to, you're a very well-informed person and professional in the industry, obviously. What do you read? What are your resources? What are your go-to resources to keep yourself up to date with what's happening in the industry?
Yeah, I probably spend too much time on social media, but obviously I read the reports that are put out by Altus and Zonda because they are related to the new housing industry. Obviously I subscribe to the Globe and I read articles every morning in the Globe to see what's happening. I love listening to the New York Times podcasts. That's one of my go-tos in the morning to see what's going on for the big issues happening in the United States and across the globe. Those are my key sources. But again, I like to talk to people. There's nothing better than getting on the phone and having a chat with a lender, having a chat with a developer, having a chat with a broker that's selling land, that's selling development sites, that's out there on the street with vendors and buyers and seeing where they're at. That stuff's invaluable.
Very true.
Obviously, I look at CMHC data and follow the Mike Moffats of the world, the Daniel Foches of the world on social media and see what they're posting about. And that's always helpful. But to really have those conversations and get a real sentiment of what's going on is really invaluable. So that's
very valid. That's very valid. Yeah. And like you said, like many of these things, firsthand knowledge, conversations, and getting to know people, that really is helpful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, or do you have any final parting thoughts before we wrap this up?
I don't know if I have any parting thoughts. I really enjoy it. I listen to your podcast. I listen to others like Working Capital and the Commercial Real Estate Podcast. I think they're great resources. Like I just mentioned, having conversations. Right. So the ability to just pop in the headphones when I'm out walking the dog, or I'm going to say at the gym, but I haven't been doing it. Been in the gym quite as often as I would like to, and listen to these things. I would love if people would listen to my podcast. It's Toronto Under Construction, in addition to yours. So please subscribe to our podcast.
I definitely encourage people to go and listen, because that's one of the reasons we got started here.
Yeah, I just think it really is invaluable to understand what people are thinking and getting deep, right? That's one of the reasons that I have roundtables, because I have this small box of knowledge, right? So I'm these different experts in their field to go inside baseball and discuss the things that they're working on and where they're going. It's really fantastic. I've learned so much, and hopefully I'll continue to learn, and hopefully that will help. I can do my small little part in getting this.
You and I both, and I'm sure you're doing more, but that's the part of the reason we're doing here as well. Like I'm many of these questions that I'm asking the guests are my own questions, and I work in the industry day in, day out, and I've done that for decades. But at the end of the day, you run into like, why are we doing that? And anyways, those are the good things about running a podcast and getting to know smart people such as yourself. Thank you very much, Ben. This has been an absolute pleasure. I learned a lot, and I'm hoping that we can work together more in the future, and hopefully in a few years we're going to have a similar conversation with much more optimistic, vibrant energy with better news.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben. Just one last thing before you leave, please make sure to visit our website. We have put together a whole bunch of different resources that you can download for free from our website. These include checklists, manuals, and also access to previous webinars. In case you have missed any of our previous webinars, you can go there, get the replay link, download the slides, and benefit from all these free resources that we've gathered on the website. Please make sure to visit. Thank you.